So, I saw Shazam and was very pleased with it. It's not the greatest of the DCEU movies, but then those are few and far between. In the ranking, Wonder Woman remains at the top as the best film that they put together. I would fit Man of Steel probably still second after hers, but it has some pretty damning flaws in it. But overall, a pretty good film that I wanted to see a follow-up to in a Man of Steel trilogy, not Batman versus Superman. Batman versus Superman Justice League, there was so much interference there, I'm not even going to count them anymore. And Suicide Squad, I guess, falls into that as well, but Suicide Squad remains the absolute worst, and that's even worse than Justice League. But so Aquaman, I guess, sort of takes second place, I suppose, or maybe shares second place with Man of Steel, because they're both have some flaws there. That Aquaman's flaws aren't as serious as Man of Steel, in that it was just too much of the dumb humor thrown in on it that kind of dragged the film down, I thought. But money-wise, it's the big winner. It outdid Wonder Woman. But Shazam is the one that follows Aquaman, and now with Shazam, I think Shazam is better than Aquaman, just as story and pacing and whatnot. There's still some problems here. Again, the humor is more appropriate for Shazam in the mood and tone that they set for the movie. But it gets a little too cheesy here and there, and it's like, all right, come on. And so, but I think now Shazam is in the second status after Wonder Woman. But while I was in the theater, there was no one else there. Somebody showed up late, but that was it. And oh boy, I don't know. I haven't looked at the numbers, but I'm hoping it does well enough to merit a sequel, and that they don't just say, well, Aquaman was some strange fluke and we got to move on. But now some aspects of Shazam, Captain Marvel, the real Captain Marvel, and compared to Captain Marvel, this movie is magnificent. So it is a solid, entertaining film from beginning to end. It doesn't just start off pretty interesting and intriguing and then fizzle. It doesn't. Again, the cheesiness towards the ending, but you got to kind of expect that, since this is more on the humor than on the scary aspects of it. Because before I went in, I saw someone describe it as, the trailers are misleading in that it seems like it's all a comedy, but it actually that's certainly there, but it ends up looking more like a horror movie. And I was like, oh, really? Well, there's some elements there, but a horror movie, not so much. I mean, the Dr. Savannah moments has this spooky business where you deal with the 7 deadly sins manifested as these demonic creatures. And they're very monstrous and evil looking and all that. And they do evil things. I mean, the most horrific scene is Savannah goes to his father's business and, murders his brother, just throws him out a window. And leaves his father to be killed by one of the demons. And so that was about as horrific as it gets, which is pretty horrific. And then there's the eerie spookiness of the Rock of Eternity, where they go through it and they're being chased by Savannah and his monsters and all that. Oh, yeah. Now, Savannah is presented more in what the New 52 has done with him. I guess they figure that makes him more menacing. He's more Lex Luthor than he was Dr. Savannah. Now, that was always one of the criticisms that ended up getting Captain Marvel sued out of existence by DC, saying it was a ripoff of Superman. And he had a bald mad scientist as a villain. And actually, he was quite a short man and all this stuff. And here he is, the imposing Mark Strong, who I think would have made a fantastic Lex Luthor. But what are you going to do? He was great as Sinestro, but, well, we know what happened there. But anyway, he's good here, too, for what they have given him. And he is pretty much the New 52 version of Dr. Savannah. But pretty much quite a few elements of Dr. Savannah are gone, but other elements are still there. We meet, of course, his brother and father, but we don't see his own kids, and maybe they'll come in later. The movie does give you some teasers More so for Mr. Mind, which actually has me quite excited. And there is a stinger in the credits. You got to stay through the credits. There are two, but the best one is where Dr. Sivana meets Mr. Mind. You see him in the Rock of Eternity briefly, and then you see that he's disappeared from the case that I guess the wizard had him in. And he shows up at the end with his radio voice. And yeah, it's a pretty dead-on interpretation of him. I mean, what else can you do? He's a worm with a radio that he talks through. I mean, going with that, they can make Shazam have a lot of the funny and interesting surrealism that they've explored with Doom Patrol and stuff like that. So that could be a cool direction to go with. And you do get an illusion and a brief imagery of Black Adam, but of course the Rock does not appear here. But what went wrong with him is referred to, and so that'll set up other stories as they go. But anyway, and so yeah, there's elements of scariness there. But the comedy really dominates the film. So I wouldn't say the trailers were totally misleading. They just didn't give away what the menace was. They show you Sivana in some of those trailers and all that, but you know. So again, with superhero movies, it's not typically a direct adaptation of the story. And by the time we've gotten to Shazam, he's gone through so many changes, and this is the latest version of him after the DC Comics did their New 52, where they rebooted him, and they've added more than just Freddy and Mary as members of his Captain Marvel family, which is what they established in the original Captain Marvel series back in the 40s. And I don't know if they're going to go with the story that Mary is actually Billy's long-lost sister. Here, the story, they show his parents, his father's in prison. His mother was pretty much a deadbeat teenager who just leaves him at a carnival. It's pretty bad. And the real story that I remember, his parents had died, and he was left in the care of a nasty uncle who didn't care about him and kind of just left him on the street. Later on, they did versions of the story where it was revealed that the mysterious stranger actually takes him to see the wizard, and later they revealed the mysterious stranger was the ghost of his father. They also showed that the father, when Billy turns into Captain Marvel, Captain Marvel looks like Billy's father, and Mary looked like the mother. Now, Mary and Freddy weren't always, in the early versions, they didn't transform into adult versions of themselves. They stayed pretty much like they looked, which kind of not much of a secret identity there. Although, pretty early on within Captain Marvel, the villains, I don't know about the rest of the people, but the villains all knew who these guys really were. Pretty early on, they figured out the secret identity. So, that's nothing new here. So of course Sivana figures out Billy is Shazam, Shazam is the wizard who dies early on. And Shazam, the story there is also taken from the New 52 version, but it sticks with the original story. Shazam is looking for a champion for his cause. And I think later on they wrote it in that he was still alive and he would show up in other versions of it. But from the original story, he dies right at the beginning there, where after Billy gets the powers and becomes Captain Marvel, this big rock hanging over his head just collapses and flattens him. And that's pretty much it for him. And here he fades away into dust because he knows his time's over, and he's desperately searching for a champion. And here, which deviates somewhat, I think, if I recall, from the New 52 version, where young Sivana, when he's a little boy, is actually one of the people that the wizard's looking for, but he fails the test. He gives in pretty quickly to the 7 deadly sins, and so he gets booted out of the Rock of Eternity. And by the time Shazam reaches Billy, he's pretty much out of options, and Billy's just, well, you're just going to have to do. Billy saves Freddy from some bullies, and so he figures, okay, good enough, and he gives him the power. Because he's dying, it's over, he's got to do it. And so Billy ends up with the Shazam powers, and then the comedy ensues from there. Of course, they borrow from Big, and that's all very true. Of course, Big remains the more superior film here, but nevertheless, there's nods to it. Yeah, that's kind of what we're doing here. And A lot of it reminded me of America's Greatest Hero with William Catt in the 80s, that show, because he has difficulty learning his powers and whatnot. And all that, it's all very well rounded and stuff, and it also acknowledges the shared universe. There was a lot of talk that the shared universe would be abandoned, and we wouldn't hear from that anymore because it's going to be standalone movies. Well, they're standalone movies, but they're within the shared universe, which I would argue is how Marvel originally approached it. So this idea that they're abandoning copying Marvel, no, now you're copying Marvel. Their previous way of tackling it was to do it ass backwards. So, and yes, I still want to see the Snyder Cut, and there's some latest, more serious news that might actually happen. So that's interesting, and I'll have to talk about that at a later date. But anyway, so Shazam delivers. I think obviously I don't think it's going to perform as well as Aquaman, and it hasn't so far, I don't think. But and that's too bad, because I think overall, as a solid film, works better than Aquaman. But there you go. And I still hold that Wonder Woman is the better movie, and it was profitable, but it was not the stellar success financially that Aquaman was. But there you go. So for Shazam, the real Captain Marvel, I'm going to give it 4 solid stars out of 5, because there's deviations here and there that I think I have to acknowledge that are a bit problematic. But overall, okay. The kid versions of the team, because he eventually gives the powers to his rest of his foster family, and that's part of 52 as well. So you have new members of the Marvel family, or Shazam family rather. And in the comics, I kind of got irritated with the younger girl, but here she does very well. So there's a nice young little actress there. And then her adult version is not bad either, and probably one of the better ones of the new group that they have. And so on and so forth. So there you go. It all works out. 4 out of 5 stars for Shazam. Thank you for watching and listening. And hey, while you're here, why not like and subscribe? And if you don't like it, well, you can say that too. But hey, subscribe. And those of you who have, thank you very much. It does warm my heart. And while you're here, how about checking out those link descriptions below? That'll take you to my many stores that have plenty of goodies for you.